Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar with Align Modern Health. I am Coach Ryan Katurin. I'm also the Director of Community Partnerships for Align Modern Health. We have a great discussion for you today, which I promise will not be a snore fest. However, we are talking sleep and all the amazing benefits that come with it. Most of us know it's important and do it on a regular basis, but are we truly getting the most out of it? In today's discussion, we'll be laying down some really helpful tips to help you optimize your sleep so that you are training and living your life to the fullest. But first, allow me to introduce this awesome panel of sleep enthusiasts and health professionals. First, she is our functional medicine doctor practicing out of our River North and Evanston clinics. She passionately seeks to build meaningful relationships with her patients, teaching them how the smallest of changes can lead to the greatest health outcomes and how they can be both empowering and sustainable. She's also into cycling, camping, and reading. And with her strength training, she's on her way to doing unassisted pull-ups. Please meet Dr. Tulio Ribeiro. Next, he is our functional medicine doctor at our Southport and Lincoln Park clinics. He is passionate about working with his patients to uncovering and treating the root cause to their health concerns. He often works with digestive health issues and believes that the gut is foundational to our health. When he's not in the clinic, you might find him by listening to and following the sweet sound of his violin. Please meet Dr. Colin Gill.
Hey everyone, good to be here.
Last but not least, she is the head coach for all of CES run programs. From college cross country to your average adult marathoner, she has over 15 years of distance coaching experience. Her running resume includes a ridiculous amount of races, well over 100 from half marathons to ultra marathon distances. She has been quoted in several publications, including Runner's World, the Chicago Tribune, and Chicago Athlete Magazine. She's an occupational therapist at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, and her own research focuses on sensor technology and sleep quality. Please welcome Coach Lori Lynn McGee-Cook. Lori, I didn't know that you're, I just learned of Lynn, so I'm going to use that every time I introduce you now at this point.
Lori Lynn?
Yeah.
I just my mother called me.
So for everyone tuning in, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A on Zoom or in the comment section on Facebook, and we will address them as we go. Let's begin. I want to begin with Coach Lori with a simple question. Why is sleep so important?
Well, Coach Ryan, that is a loaded question, right? Otherwise, we have a whole webinar about it, but just a quick overview of that. If you spend 1/3 of your life sleeping, you think about it, if you do it right, then obviously it's got to be important for some reason. But I mean, things we'll talk about today, it's important for your cardiovascular health. It's important for recovery and injury prevention. It's important for learning and memory. It's important for metabolism. And those are kind of the big broad topics that we'll talk about and why it's so important.
Okay, great. Well, so to even get a better understanding of sleep, what are the core components of sleep and what happens when we sleep?
So when you fall asleep, you don't just go offline and nothing's happening. There's really amazing physiological effects that are happening in your brain. And in a typical person when they sleep, if you record that on an EEG, you can see this really beautiful coordination of brain activity that is happening. And what a lot of people, especially if you've been reading more about like your fitness devices and just different things that are in the media about sleep, one of the main things that you hear is that there's different types of sleep staging. So it's not just you're awake or you're asleep. You'll hear things like terms like non-REM sleep or REM sleep. So a lot of times people hear about REM sleep and they don't know there's another component called non-REM sleep. And what REM stands for is rapid eye movement sleep. So then the non-REM component would be non-rapid eye movement sleep. And what happens across the night, this staging phenomenon is quite beautiful in how it happens. When in a typical night's sleep, somebody's staging, you would first kind of go into this non-REM sleep, and in brain activity, it would look like these beautifully kind of slow, high amplitude brain waves. And then you do that for a little bit, and then you go into this stage called REM sleep. And the reason why it is called rapid eye movement sleep is because your eyes move rapidly while you're sleeping during that, but your brain activity actually starts to look a little bit more like wake again. And then you go back into a non-REM cycle and a REM cycle, and the non-REM cycles get shorter and the REM cycles get longer. And that's sort of like somebody that has just kind of a typical healthy functioning system. That's what it would look like. And it pretty much looks like that across people. So what's interesting about that is if there's that coordination of activity that's going on in your brain, it's obviously got to be significant for something, and doing something physiologically that is important. And so those are kind of there's other stages that are sort of within that. And all those other stages also contribute to other physiological effects that you would see in your body. So there's certain hormones that are being released during certain stages in your brain. There are cardiovascular changes that are happening. So some people might have heard of like the flight or fight responses. So different, and that's what's called scientifically the autonomic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system goes through very specific changes throughout those different stages as well. So that's a very broad brush overview of what happens while you're sleeping, but it's actually, once you kind of read about it and actually kind of see it, it's very beautiful. Again, coordination of physiological activity.
Oh, that was so like eloquently said. Like you got me so engaged into that. You just kept going. But I'm going to ask you one more question here. So I have heard something really, really interesting and kind of cool, but that sleep is arguably more important than your diet and exercise combined. Is that true? Or like, what are your general thoughts about that?
As somebody who's like a big, huge sleep nerd, I can definitely argue that, but I can tell you one of the reasons why that is. And if you're not getting a proper night of sleep, let's just think about diet in general. You can eat really healthy and really well, but sleep contributes to how your body metabolizes different foods and just the way you hydrate and how you practice your nutrition. So if you're not getting a good night's sleep, you're not going to be able to practice a proper diet as well as if you had a full night's sleep. And then also for the exercise component of it, if you're not feeling very well the next day because you haven't gotten a good night's sleep, then there's a couple of different things that will happen. One, you might not be motivated to exercise. So if you're not motivated to exercise in the very first place, then you're not even going to get the exercise in the first place. And then also certain physiological effects that happen throughout the night, especially how sleep contributes to your cardiovascular functioning. You're not going to get the same type of workout as you would as if you had a proper night of sleep.
Love it.
So there's other things too. So specifically, let's think about certain specifics about what sleep does. So Dr. Gill, would you talk about like how sleep affects cholesterol and heart disease?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Laura, I love how you put it, just obviously sleep has a lot of components that are important, right? Both physiologically within our nervous system and also just for motivation and behavioral changes. One thing that happens when they've studied individuals who have insomnia, who struggle with sleep in a number of different ways, is that insomnia will cause a few different changes in physiology, which will contribute to cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and risk factors for stroke and heart attack. One of the things that happens when we don't sleep well is our autonomic nervous system becomes imbalanced. So there are two branches to our autonomic nervous system. We have the sympathetic side, which is the fight or flight. You see a bear, in the wilderness, you're running the opposite way. Not too worried about resting, not too worried about digesting your food, but just it basically gives immediate energy to the brain right now. The other side is the parasympathetic side, and that's the rest and digest, where your body's at ease, your mind's at ease, and you're able to actually repair and rebuild a lot of the cells and the tissue damage that happens in everyday life. So when we don't sleep well, the sympathetic side of our nervous system actually becomes chronically turned up, and the parasympathetic side actually gets turned down. So we have this kind of imbalancing of our autonomic nervous system. And what this does is the more sympathetic activation we have, our blood pressure goes up, and our body actually begins to generate free radicals, which are basically referred to as inflammation. And a lot of these changes set the stage for, if they're there for years and years, they really set the stage for degeneration of our arteries, for plaque buildup, and eventually for cardiovascular disease. The other things that will actually impact our body's metabolism is when we don't sleep well, our body tries to hypercompensate by keeping us awake during the day because we're tired, right? We didn't have a restorative night's sleep. And a lot of people with insomnia get this kind of always like hyperstimulation kind of feeling. And what happens is your body releases a hormone called cortisol during the day at a higher level. And we'll talk about cortisol a little bit later, but what cortisol does is it basically stimulates your nervous system and helps you stay awake and focus. But when we don't sleep well, our body is trying to overcompensate from this fatigue associated with sleep by releasing a lot of cortisol. And cortisol interferes with the way that our body handles blood sugar. And actually, high cortisol for long periods of time will contribute to conditions like type 2 diabetes and other issues where we begin to develop insulin resistance. And we can actually see somebody develop metabolic syndrome, not from their diet, but actually from a chronic history of really poor sleep. So obviously our sleep has a lot to say with a lot of aspects of our health, and definitely our metabolic health is one of those really important for a public health standpoint and just for personal health. Very important to make sure we're sleeping well to kind of give ourselves the most protection we can from that kind of disease process.
That was great.
Yeah.
Dr. Ribeiro, as active training endurance athletes, can you help us understand how does sleep improve our recovery?
Absolutely. So sleep quality before and after exercise is going to be pretty important, right? Deep sleep is the time when a hormone called growth hormone, human growth hormone, is released. Growth hormone is going to stimulate muscle growth and repair. It's going to stimulate bone building and fat burning. Sleep deprivation is going to slow the release of growth hormone, right? So we definitely don't want that if we're trying to improve our physical performance. Getting healthy, plentiful sleep is going to play a role in maintaining your muscle mass, and sleep deprivation is linked to both reduced muscle mass and muscle strength in both men and women, particularly with age. So the older you are, the more your quality and quantity of sleep is going to have an impact on your recovery, on your training process, meeting all these goals that you as athletes are setting for yourselves. Deep sleep deprivation can also interfere with bone health, reducing bone density and the production of new strong bone. One of the main benefits of weight-bearing exercises, or one of the most important benefits of weight-bearing exercise outside of like cardiovascular health, maintaining lean body mass, is going to be its impact on our healthy bones. And you don't want to lose out on that benefit by not getting enough sleep, right? We all want to have healthy bones, especially women as we age. We don't have to worry about osteoporosis. If we're working hard, training hard, we want to get that benefit, right? Sleep's also necessary for learning a new skill. So if you're seeing one of our physical medicine providers at AMH and you're trying to ingrain some new movement patterns or rehab some imbalanced muscles, deep sleep is going to be crucial for that as well. Lack of sleep, called sleep debt, appears to have a negative effect on sports performance also by impacting your cognitive function, your mood, and your reaction time, right? So if you're having to make split decisions depending on what sport it is that you're playing, team sport, a little bit less with running, but you have to keep an eye on the terrain that you're looking at. Making good decisions is going to be impacted by whether or not you're sleeping.
That's good.
So very far-reaching.
I've heard different sides to this, but should we nap after a hard workout or save it all for the night? Meaning, like, what would napping affect our quality of sleep at night? And this is for anyone who wants to kind of chime in, but I'll start with you, Dr. Cook.
Sure. Yeah. So napping, it's quite interesting, and I'll talk about how it applies to endurance training. And there's a lot of really great examples out there of like really elite athletes that you'll see will practice this. So if you have a really hard, let's talk about like a long run on a Saturday or Sunday. So the way your sleep looks across the night, going back to like looking at those brain waves, is also influenced by not only the amount of time you're awake. So if you were sleep deprived and you're awake for a certain amount of time, you're going to see a certain type of intensity in your brain, but also the intensity that you're awake, what you're doing, so the activity. So a lot of physical activity will actually generate a lot of non-REM sleep in the very beginning of the night. And if you take a nap after you have a really hard workout, it'll help, again, kind of get going that non-REM sleep, and it'll help you recover a little bit better because you're going to get a little bit of growth hormone and those type of physiology in there that help act on reducing injury and helping you just recover a little bit for the amount of intensity that you might have done in the morning. So a lot of times you're like, okay, should I nap every day? Other cultures, they always call it the siesta, right? Other cultures do take a little bit of a siesta in the afternoon. And obviously those cultures have kind of figured out the benefits for that. But if you've had a hard workout, I would highly recommend, if you can try to nap for, 30 minutes to a good 30 minutes is fine. You don't want to nap too long, because I don't know if you've ever napped too long and you start to wake up out of sleep stages that you probably weren't supposed to go into quite yet. So then that can affect the quality of sleep later. But yes, napping after real intense workouts is super beneficial, just because of the physiological effects that everybody's already kind of had in this discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Ribeiro, I know we touched base on this a little bit, but what hormones are affected by sleep?
That is a great question. Sleep impacts virtually all of our hormones is the short answer. Secretion of some hormones increases during sleep, like growth hormone that I mentioned earlier, also prolactin and luteinizing hormone. Those hormones have effect in our sexual hormone function and loop, while some hormones actually are inhibited during the night, like thyroid stimulating hormone and cortisol. And so those are going to be more promoting of wakefulness. So considerable research has been linked to also endocrine dysfunction and sleep dysfunction, specifically insomnia. It's been proposed that overactivity of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, or HPA axis, which controls hormonal interactions between part of the brain and our adrenal glands, which help us to process stress and other things, can impact sleep function and subsequently increase our secretion of cortisol, which Dr. Gill has mentioned, and norepinephrine, both of which are going to increase and promote wakefulness. So we definitely want to be kind of making sure we're not overactivating those pathways. Sleep can also lead to unintended weight gain through a hormonal feedback loop. Of course, sleep isn't the only factor in weight gain, of course. There are several, like genetics, diet, exercise, underlying health conditions, but there is sufficient evidence to suggest that, well, when sleep is down, weight goes up. And I know we'll talk about that a little more moving forward, or we could do it now, whatever you guys want.
Well, we talk about cortisol, and then there's another term as well too that people probably hear all the time is about melatonin and taking melatonin to help you sleep. So Dr. Gill, can you tell us the difference between, or kind of how cortisol and melatonin are related?
Absolutely. I'm actually going to use an image because words do not suffice for the simplicity of how this is set up. But can you guys see my screen all right?
Yep.
Awesome. So cortisol and melatonin are simply opposites. Cortisol keeps your body, like Dr. Ribeiro said, in an awake, alert phase of being, which we want during the day, but not at night. And melatonin does the opposite. It actually helps to dampen the activity in our brains and help us be less alert and actually go into restful sleep. So they inhibit each other. So when one is high, the other is low, and they actually go in this, what we call a diurnal rhythm, just meaning they go up and down throughout the day. So we see here, cortisol is the dotted line, and melatonin is the smooth line. So we're going to talk a little bit later about things that influence cortisol. So maybe letting the cat out of the bag early here, but if you look at a screen with blue light, that's going to up your cortisol your body makes, because your body thinks you're out and it's midday and you need to be alert. That's going to inhibit melatonin. So if you're somebody who looks at screens right before bed, we know right off the bat that your body's melatonin production is going to be a little bit behind, because all the cortisol coming from that screen is going to be interfering with the whole kind of cycle.
Awesome. Dr. Ribeiro, I know you mentioned in your previous answer about how sleep can affect like weight gain, this and that. So I'd like to know, how does sleep affect your physical appearance overall?
Absolutely. So like I said, evidence supports that when sleep goes down, weight goes up. A study from researchers at the University of Colorado did a study. They found that 1 week of sleeping about 5 hours a night led study participants to gain an average of 2 pounds. So when you're not getting enough sleep, you experience multiple changes to your body that can lead to weight gain. Sleep deprivation causes changes to hormones that regulate your hunger and your appetite. The hormone leptin is going to suppress your appetite and encourage the body to expend energy. Sleep deprivation is going to reduce your leptin. So the hormone ghrelin, on the other hand, triggers feelings of hunger, and ghrelin goes up when you're short on sleep. And this kind of makes sense, right? You're not getting that time to repair your body while you're sleeping. So your body's like, okay, what else can I use to kind of build myself back up? Oh, food, let me feel hungry, right? Sleep deprivation also changes what foods you're most interested in eating, creating a more intense cravings for fat and sugar-rich foods, things that have a lot of energy or very quickly available energy. Without enough sleep, your brain can't make reasonable decisions and use your best judgment about food. So you're more likely to be impulsive and give in to junk food cravings. About physical appearance though, sleep can also impact more than just your weight. The boost in growth hormone that we talked about earlier via deep sleep is related to an increase in the production of collagen, the protein that gives skin its elasticity and firmness, right? Keeping the wrinkles at bay. Research shows that sleep deprivation interferes with collagen production and can actually weaken the integrity of your skin.
Thank you.
Oh, I had a picture to show you guys. I got all excited, nerding out. Let me kind of break it down for you. Hold on. How do I do this? Screen share. Uh-oh, I need to make this bigger. Sorry guys, I'm ruining the presentation.
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, that's great.
All right, so really quickly, can you see that? Basically, this is just a breakdown of ghrelin and leptin, right? We're getting enough sleep. We have low ghrelin, normal appetite, high leptin. We feel satisfied after eating. If we're not getting enough sleep, obviously this flips. This is similar to cortisol and melatonin being kind of opposites of each other. It's the same with leptin and ghrelin. We don't get enough sleep. We have high ghrelin. We're feeling hungry. We have low leptin, so we're not very satisfied even after we do eat. And that can cause this kind of cascade of physiological reactions, right? We're sleep deprived. Our leptin goes down, our ghrelin goes up. That leads to increased hunger. That's going to lead to increased caloric intake. If we're not spending our time asleep, we have more hours on our hands to actually eat, again, increasing our caloric intake, leading to unintended weight gain. We have altered thermoregulation or temperature regulation, so we have reduced energy expenditure. We're more tired, so we don't want to do as much, again, leading to reduced energy expenditure. We have increased stress hormone, and that's going to lead to a reduction in our state of alertness and concentration after a significant amount of time, right? We usually, when we have a lot of cortisol for a short amount of time, we have increased awareness. But if this is our constant state, it tends to we get a little brain foggy, and we actually lose that awareness and that ability to concentrate because we're constantly getting pulled in other directions. And so all of these things can be kind of related back to sleep deprivation.
Awesome.
Right.
So yeah, good explanation.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that too is it goes back to when I talked about there is a certain coordination of sleep staging that goes on throughout the night as well. A lot of times too, what happens is when people are short sleepers and they sleep short, is what they're doing is they're depriving themselves of REM sleep. And in that REM sleep just has just as many things that happen during it that will affect all these physiological things that we've already talked about. But one of the things about REM sleep is the research shows that that's the time where we sort of consolidate our emotions and wake up refreshed and being able to feel emotionally well. And when we lose that sort of into that sleep, that REM sleep, that it also affects the way we make decisions and how we can react to just different things during the day. So it all kind of goes full circle too with there's probably a lot of the pieces too of course there's those hormone regulations, but craving the salty foods, or maybe you crave sweet foods. I find when I'm sleep deprived, all I want is chips and coffee, but I can never quite get enough of it. It's just I still can't even put that much into my body to really still satisfy that. It's I just need to sleep the next night and get that full cycles of sleep in order to still recover from that.
Mm. Okay.
And then there's also the just fragmented sleep as well. So you might say, well, I am in bed, 8 or 9 hours a night, but your sleep might be super fragmented. You might wake up a lot throughout the night. And there's so many different things that contribute to that. You might have certain circadian That's when we talk about melatonin and everything, and alertness is, might have certain circadian problems where you're, you might not be sleeping at the right times, or you might be staying up too late and then falling asleep that is not in a regular routine as well. So talking about staying up late, people do this all the time, because the thing about in our society, especially in the United States, it's a badge of honor to get by with the least amount of sleep as you possibly can and jam pack as much stuff in the day as you can. Especially speaking specifically to this audience, endurance runners tend to be people that really have a lot of ambitions. So they're trying to get their workouts, and they're really ambitious at work. They stay up late, and if they don't stay up late and do that, people think that they're going to think poorly of them, that they're lazy. But it has been shown over and over again, people that actually get their 8 or 9 or 7 to 9 hours of sleep actually perform better even at work. So everything contributes, one thing contributes to the next when it comes to getting this appropriate amount of sleep, and getting the sleep so it's consolidated, not disrupted throughout the night, and sleeping at a consistent basis. So one of the things we talk about, that one of the best things that you can do for your sleep is always do it at the same time. Go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. And if you can do that all the time, that's going to really anchor good sleep in general. It's like getting that down is the first big step into changing the quality of sleep if you do experience poor sleep.
To piggyback off of that, I was telling the fellow participants just as we started this webinar that I used to be a postpartum doula. I would help infants, parents of new infants, kind of help get their babies to go to actually go to sleep. And basically, we're just big old babies, right? Like, we need consistent bedtime routines. Like, that's the first thing you tell any new parent is set good routines. Same is true for us as adults. We need to kind of put ourselves to bed with similar processes, right? Like, we go to bed at the same time, we wake up at the same time, we have a nice, quiet, dark room that we sleep in, and all of these things really are supportive of good health, good sleep hygiene.
Well, now shift work, so night shift work, is considered by the World Health Organization a carcinogen. So circadian timing in general is, if you're going to bed at the circadian times that are not quite what your biological system is supposed to be used to, and it has been related to different types of cancer.
Interesting, fascinating.
Yeah.
So, so now that we're kind of on the circadian topic, Dr. Gill, can you talk to us about how, we've talked a little bit about how light affects our sleep, but how can we try to eliminate all light?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of sources. And the first thing I would say is, during the day, a lot of us actually need more light. We actually need to get light stimulation for our body to know we're awake. So we get a good amount of cortisol release, so we have good energy throughout the day. At night, though, as it tends to get later into the afternoon, evening, that's really when we need to start thinking about toning down on the light exposure. One of the ways that we do this, because we're a culture that looks at screens all day, every day for 16 hours a day, is you can get an app for your computer called f.lux. So it's essentially flux, but there's a dot between the F and the L. And what this does is it actually changes the filter of your screen to allow less blue light, which is the most stimulating light. So it actually allows more blue light during the peak midday hours, like 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m., but throughout the afternoon, it slowly kind of constricts the amount of blue light you can see, so you're getting less and less stimulation, and it's simulating what we would see in a typical day if we're just outside all day. There are also all sorts of night settings on phones now too. I would still say that any amount of light late at night, really within 90 minutes to 2 hours of bedtime, is too much. But there are dimmers and night shift settings on phones that will also restrict blue light. The other thing that you can do is blue light blocking glasses, which are really popular now and pretty affordable. So these, through the glasses, they're actually going to have a similar effect that some of those apps would have on your screen. Now, the one thing I'll say about blue light blocking glasses is they can be really great, especially for individuals who might have headaches, or they might kind of feel not well staring at screens all day and notice that when they start to stare at a screen, they get a headache or some kind of symptom come on. but you don't actually want to wear them all day throughout your day, because remember, our body needs some amount of blue light to stimulate cortisol and to keep us awake. We need cortisol. So you actually don't want to wear blue light blocking glasses and have these filters on all day, because your body's going to have a very blunted cortisol response, and you're going to be tired. You're going to be pretty sleepy. It may even affect your sleep at night. So we definitely need the right amount of blue light at the right times throughout the day.
That's so good. So literally everything in moderation.
Absolutely. Seems to be.
So, yeah, I guess I have a quick question for Dr. Romero. Let's go back and talk about the eating thing for a second. And what can we eat, and when should we like stop eating? Like, how does eating throughout the day affect how you can go to sleep?
That's a great question. So, obviously, throughout the day, we want to be making the best possible choices that we can for our bodies, right? Like, food is messages to our body, basically. Like, we take that food in, we turn that into ourselves, and we turn it into different neurotransmitters and hormones that tell our body how to operate. So the best quality food that we can give ourselves is going to lead to the best quality messages that we're transmitting. And that's going to be the same for sleep. The general rule of thumb is to avoid eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. Some people have issues with heartburn. You don't want to eat too much spicy, salty, or like greasy foods before bed. You don't want to eat really anything that taxes or upsets your stomach before bed, especially, like I just mentioned, fatty fried foods, spicy foods. Also alcohol. It might make you drowsy and help you fall asleep, but can actually make it harder for you to sleep deeply and continuously throughout the night. And it should be avoided in the hours before bed, so we don't have that fragmented sleep that you actually mentioned, Lori. As we all know, caffeine is a stimulant, and its effect on the body can last many hours. So it's best not to consume it after the mid-afternoon or earlier if you're very sensitive to it. Some people are just not that sensitive to caffeine. My dad could have a cup of coffee, go to bed, right to bed, no big deal. But some people, if they have, a sip of caffeine in the morning, they're going to be wired all day. So definitely you want to listen to your body on that one. Very sugary foods can also impact sleep by causing reactive hypoglycemia. So basically, if we eat something super sugary, we get a ton of sugar or glucose in our bloodstream, and the body wants glucose to be regulated in a very tight reference range. And if it goes too high, pancreas says, oh no, releases some insulin. All that insulin pulls the blood sugar into the muscles, into the adipose tissue, and then all of a sudden there's no blood sugar, or there's no sugar in the blood, and the brain also does not like that. So then we have to then release cortisol, which is going to stimulate it's going to cause an increase in our blood sugar, and that cortisol then, as we've talked about, is going to cause us to feel awake, right? So if you tend to wake up in the middle of the night often and you're feeling hungry, you could try a small, healthy protein and fat-based snack, something like a hard-boiled egg or a handful of almonds, and that can support stable blood sugar throughout the night and keep you from waking up. In terms of things that are good for you, like foods that promote and help with sleep, a pilot study from 2018 found sleep benefits for people who drank tart cherry juice, which is something that we also recommend as kind of an anti-inflammatory agent. It's really great. It's got a lot of antioxidant properties. People who drank 2 1-cup servings of tart cherry juice per day were found to have more total sleep time and higher sleep efficiency than those who didn't. These benefits may come from the fact that tart cherries have found to have above average concentrations of melatonin, which again, we've talked about. And tart cherries, like I said, have antioxidant effect that is beneficial for sleep. Another research study found that fatty fish can be good for better sleep. The study over a period of months found that people who eat salmon 3 times per week had far better overall sleep, as well as improved daytime functioning. Those omega-3s are so good for our brain. Researchers believe that fatty fish may help sleep by providing a healthy dose of vitamin D, and as I just mentioned, those omega-3 fatty acids, which are involved in the body's regulation of serotonin. So this study focused particularly on fish consumption during the winter months when vitamin D levels tend to be lower. So this is something that we should all start thinking about as September is next week, right? Winter is on its way to Chicago, even though it's like so hot today. And then also lastly, nuts like almonds, walnuts, pistachios, and cashews are often considered to be really good for sleep. Though the exact amounts can vary per nut or type of nut, variety of nut, they tend to contain melatonin as well as essential minerals like magnesium and zinc that are important for a range of bodily processes. And a combo of melatonin, magnesium, and zinc can be helpful with older adults that suffer from insomnia.
Great. So, so we're talking about sleep, getting into, into sleep. Let's talk about kind of waking up from that. I've heard that we should naturally wake up, but so should I be using an alarm? And like, what's ideal versus realistic? Lori?
Yeah, I mean, ideally you would be waking up naturally. And if you did go to bed at the same time every night and woke up at the same time every morning, that would naturally happen for you. For years, I used an alarm, and now my alarm is my 5-year-old. However, he does wake up at the exact same time every day. So, he's actually at his grandparents this week, and I did notice I woke up at the same time. But using the alarm, a lot of times, if you are using an alarm, it's probably because you know that you probably went to bed too late, or you're just worried about you're not going to wake up. And if you're worried you're not waking up, there's either something wrong with the quantity of sleep you're getting, so the amount of sleep duration you're getting, or the quality of sleep that you're getting if you need to use an actual alarm. Speaking of this, so sometimes people are waking up a little bit earlier than they have to, and I have to mention that something I just learned about a study that looked at daylight savings time. Okay, so this kind of ties in like some of the cardiovascular issues that we think that people might have with short sleep, but they have found that people that have even wake up an hour earlier than they're normally used to. So we test this in daylight savings time. So think about in spring, we spring ahead. So everybody loses an hour of sleep. They have found that on that week following, there's a 24% increase in heart attacks. Now they're in November, and you fall back and you gain that sleep, there is a 21% decrease in heart attacks. And this is also true with car accidents and other things that we think might be affected by short sleep. So it shows you that one thing, you can't really bank sleep. It's not one of those things like I'm going to be, a sleeping weekend warrior and I'm going to get all my sleep in during the weekend. You have to consistently do that across the board. So my point is even 1 hour of sleep has really can have really detrimental short-term effects.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dr. Gill, like you talk, going back to this circadian thing, and this is really problematic though for a lot of us, right? So during the week, we might have a different work schedule than during the weekend, where we, like a lot of the endurance runners, have a different training schedule. I personally will wake up probably the earliest I do all week on a Saturday morning. It's not that far off, but I think that's really kind of true for a lot of people's lifestyles. So what do you think about trying to stick to that regular routine? What I think will actually help with the circadian rhythm of that, if you are training intensely on the weekends, you're probably going to need just a little bit more sleep as well. So when you are training very hard, it's okay that if you find out that you slept 10 hours that night afterwards. If you look this up, they talk about a lot of elite athletes, basketball players, like Dina Castor. I think there was a lot of information about what her sleep is, but those athletes sleep like 12 hours a day. And that's okay. They're compensating for all this intensity and work that they're putting on their bodies.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I guess if we're gonna touch base on that, Lori, you're talking about 12 hours of sleep. Let's talk about what are your feelings about sleep quality versus sleep quantity, and also let's tie in that idea. I'm sure Dina's having some sort of amazing devices and all the best things around her. But I know that some of your studies will include sleep devices. So let's talk about that a little bit. Sleep quality versus quantity, and are there certain devices that we can use to help monitor that ourselves without having to go to the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab?
So sleep quantity is just the duration. So it's the amount you're actually sleeping. So the recommended amount for a typical person is 7 to 9 hours. It might be a little bit more depending on your activity levels. So that's just the amount of time you might be in bed, but the quality of that is very different. So you might be lying in bed for 8 or 9 hours, but your duration might only end up being 6 hours. And there's a lot of things that quality is. So quality is, did you have a lot of fragmentation throughout the night? So you wanted your sleep to be consolidated with very minimal wake across the night. You want that coordination of sleep stages too, to look consistent throughout the night. So I talked earlier about if you missed that REM stage because you got up earlier than you should have and you gave yourself a short sleep duration, you might find the next night we'll see that people either REM rebound, so they might go into a REM stage early, or they might inappropriately go into stages when they're not supposed to, and that's just because they're trying to make up for the certain sleep quality they might have lost. I know I'm sure everybody's kind of heard about sleep apnea and people using CPAP, but you hear about sleep apnea a lot, and that's just losing. People kind of stop breathing throughout the night, and it's a very common condition, and it's probably one of the most common sleep disorders that people have. But what happens with sleep apnea is that whenever they are not able to breathe throughout the night, they wake themselves up. So you might be very fragmented sleep throughout the night, and so that will mess too with the coordination of sleep stages that your body is typically used to. So it can do all these beautiful physiological processes and work with the hormones and do all those good things so that you can wake up feeling refreshed as well. So the quality of it has to do with how much fragmentation that you're getting, how deep you're going into your sleep stages, if you're going into those sleep stages. So it might not just be the amount of time that you were actually in bed. And some people, like sleep apnea, for example, you might have felt like you slept for 9 hours, but the reason why you might have slept for 9 hours is you never really got into the deeper stages of sleep. So you could have, I slept for 9 hours, but you might not realize that the quality of that was not very good. And so then you don't wake up refreshed at all either. And then that sort of exasperates other cardiovascular issues as well, because your sympathetic system is now it's an overload. And so then that's some of the cardiovascular effects that continue to perpetuate itself over long term. And that's where kind of like a lot of the heart disease and hypertension and those things started coming from too.
Okay.
So it's all about that sleep quality to sort of help mend that or help prevent any of those problems going forward.
Yeah. And so, what are what are some devices that we can use? Like, can I use my Garmin? How good is the Garmin or like even Apple Watch at tracking our quality of sleep?
So yeah, if you become a big device nerd, I have a Garmin. A lot of people have Fitbits. I think there's other brands that are out there too, but a lot of it, if you start to nerd out on it and start seeing what's in the app, a lot of them will give you sleep information. So if you are really interested in that, you should sleep with your watch on it, and it'll actually give you sleep quality information across the board. The Fitbit will give you, and I can kind of show you an example. Let me see if I can share my screen. You guys see that?
Yep.
So some Fitbits will give you something like this. And the Garmin looks very similar. I think my Garmin doesn't really talk about REM. Some of them will just say light and deep sleep and awake. Some of them will say REM and non-REM. Some will say REM, light, and deep. And with here, the red is like the wake. And so this is a pretty good example of what you would want your sleep to look like. So you're awake, and you might see that you woke up a couple of times during the night, which is fine. You're going to toss, you're going to move throughout the night. So that's completely normal. And then when you first go to sleep, you go into this light stage, and then you should go into the darker blue deep stage. And then you might wake up a little bit, and then you'll go into another deep stage. But what you'll notice is your REM sleep will get longer and longer throughout the night. And so this is actually a very good example of what a typical night of sleep would actually look like. And I do find for people that consistently wear their watch on a 24-hour basis, where the actual app starts to get to know what your wake and sleep rhythms are, that it becomes more and more accurate to look at your stages between at least, lighter and deep sleep and how much you might wake throughout the night. So if it's something that you're interested in looking at your sleep quality, I would encourage people to actually use their apps to sort of kind of get an idea of what their quality does look like. And people are like, well, how does it do this? If you ever, the watches that do this the best, it has a little light sensor on the back of the watch. And that what that light sensor is doing is it's measuring volumetric changes in it actually can kind of read what's going on in your blood vessels. So it's like measuring the changes in your blood vessels. So therefore it can get information that's like about your heart rate and information about blood flow changes, which in turn is those blood flow changes in your heart rate and what they'll call like heart rate variability. It's very different during each sleep stage too. So it's just another biological marker of how your sleep stages might look.
So interesting. I thought of wear my watch a lot. I might have to start playing with it at sleep too. This is good.
Yeah, I encourage, if you guys have one of those watches, I encourage you to just check it out. But it becomes more accurate the more consistent that you wear it throughout the night. But obviously the gold standard is you actually have to go into a sleep clinic. They put all these electrodes on your head and you wear, an you wear something that measures ECG and then movement. And there's like these breathing belts for sleep apnea. So the study I'm actually working on now and I'm here at work tonight for is we're trying to use a more non-invasive wearable sensor system so we can get more accurate monitoring of sleep staging and using those physiological markers to make sure that they match up with the sleep staging. And so we can do things more non-invasively. So that way we can monitor people's sleep more closely and we can make recommendations for them in the future or help make people recommendations in the future how we can just improve it, which doesn't have to be medication. There's a lot of good tips on how people can, improve their sleep quality.
We're doing it right now.
We are. So one of them is the temperature, like something I study a lot is temperature changes in your body. So your body changes temperature throughout the day. Mm-hmm. And one of the best tips that a behavioral health psychologist, if you were going in there for like insomnia, would tell you is one of the first things they're going to tell you is, well, it might be stop staring at your phone. But two would be turn down the temperature in your room. Because one of the best predictors of how fast you might fall asleep is how fast your core body temperature will actually drop. So when your core body temperature drops by 1 or 2 degrees, it typically helps, predicts what's called sleep latency. So it helps you fall asleep faster.
That's good. You answered my question. I was going to ask you about thermoregulation.
I know you were. That's why I went ahead and just
So what kind of temperature are we talking about? Should we set our rooms to?
The recommendations are about 68 degrees. That might mean something a little bit different for everybody else. I think everybody has a little bit of different temperature regulation. I mean, You know how I wear 17 pairs of pants in the winter because I get so cold all the time, where other people get really warm very easily. So, I mean, that's something that everyone's probably gonna have a different sweet spot, but the general recommendation is 68 degrees.
Yeah.
They also other ways to get your temperature down. They say taking a warm shower at night actually helps you cool down your body temperature because the warmth is actually dissipating heat out through your distal extremities. And then it actually helps your core temperature drop as well. There's other weird recommendations too that you'll read in the literature. Like one of them's wearing a pair of warm socks. That'll help. Again, there's a lot of different, you could debate those, but it's an interesting thing if you're interested in temperature.
I can attest to the warm shower before bed being beneficial. That's definitely, I've experimented a few times in the last week or two, and it's definitely has an effect. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and same for me, as far as room temperature, I'm more of it has to be 50 degrees in the room, but I do increase the air conditioning at night. And it helps so much more for myself, but that's me. Yeah.
Grew up in Florida, so I definitely know that it's impossible to sleep when it's hot out, but definitely, I don't think I could do 50 degrees overnight, Ryan. That's just too much.
So then, Dr. Gill, what would you say about how exercise can affect our sleep?
Yeah, so that's actually perfect timing with the temperature changes. Exercise is beneficial for sleep as long as it isn't really within a 2-hour period of when you're going to sleep. That's because exercise just stimulates cortisol that we've been talking about today. So if you exercise, your body assumes that, hey, you need energy right now. So It's going to use cortisol to help you get that energy. And if you remember, that means your melatonin is going to drop. But afternoon, early to mid-afternoon or morning, both have, really there's been some debate as to which is better. And it really just kind of depends on the person. Some people think that exercising closer toward bedtime will actually also help your body temperature cool more quickly, because you will gain an increased amount of heat. And then as that kind of goes down throughout the evening, by the time you're going to bed, your core temperature is actually dropped. That's a thought out there. So I definitely recommend for people with exercise about 30 minutes, 5 times a week at a moderate intensity, which is about 60% of your max heart rate. And you can figure out that by 220 minus your age for a rough estimate. So 5 times a week, 30 minutes. And they found that, most of the study has been on endurance. So, just aerobic activities, so running, cycling, swimming. But it also looks like lifting and more strength and conditioning work is also beneficial. So it really just depends on what do you like doing, what kind of exercise is sustainable for you, and then keep doing that. And one of the cool things why exercise helps us sleep is the more you exercise, your body basically builds up this molecule called adenosine throughout the day. And adenosine is basically the more energy that you burn in a given day, you're going to have more adenosine created each day. And every night, if we have a good night's sleep, the adenosine actually gets basically detoxed and kind of swept out of our brain. So we start from a clean slate every day. But if you exercise and if you're generally more active during the day, you have more adenosine in your brain. And adenosine basically stops our neurons in our brain from being so active, and it's actually inhibitory, which really translates to being able to turn your thoughts off at night and to quickly flip the switch from being on and engaged and active to bedtime. So that's one of the reasons why we think that sleep is so beneficial is you get more adenosine. So it becomes much more easy to actually turn your brain off at night.
Great, that's awesome. Dr. Ribeiro, I've heard this term before, our bedrooms as a sleep sanctuary. How can we make our bedrooms more like a sleep sanctuary? And should I not be, putting my TV in the bedroom? Like, what should we do here?
So first part of the question, how to kind of create a sleep sanctuary, things that we've kind of talked about. You want it to be dark, right? Like melatonin is inhibited by bright lights. So if we want to increase the amount of melatonin that we have circulating throughout our nervous system, we definitely want to have it nice and dark in our bedroom. Also TVs, especially now with smart TVs, release a lot of blue light, which we all know from this wonderful webinar, increases our alertness. Our cortisol goes up with blue light. So definitely getting the TV out of the bedroom is going to be a great place to start. If you have a TV in there and you're like, no, I have it in the closet, it's fine. How much more likely are you to turn on your TV if you're like struggling to fall asleep, if it's just right there that close, So I recommend to all my patients, take your TVs out of your bedrooms. There's really just no reason for them to be in there. It's also just like I had mentioned before, we want to have good sleep routines. We just want to have good routines in general, but especially around sleep. If part of your routine is you need a TV to shut off at night, like that's going to be a really hard habit for you to break. So really trying to not set yourself up to get that kind of dependency. It can be easy for us to shut off our brains if we're not engaging with our thoughts, but instead maybe engaging in some mindfulness activity, some kind of meditation to help our brains shut down instead of, blasting our eyeballs with this blue light, which is then going to lead to more cortisol, which is not going to be helpful for us. It's going to be super beneficial for you getting to sleep, and that's going to contribute to that sleep sanctuary. It's not just about like the actual environment, it's also about the environment of our brains as part of that sleep sanctuary.
Great. Well, hey, this has been awesome information, and a lot of information that we put out there for everyone. For anyone tuning in, if you have a moment, if you have a question, this is the time to kind of post that in the Q&A or in the comment section of Facebook. But because all this information can be a little bit overwhelming for our panelists, can you give our audience one piece of advice that would have maybe the most impact on their sleep? I'll start with you, Lori.
What I would say is the thing about sleep is I think it's pretty non-negotiable. If you want to be, it's a necessity in life. And again, I've mentioned many times, it's a coordination of that and a certain quality of it that you need to get. But if you're prioritizing that, and you are identifying the things that will help you get the best sleep that you can, you're going to find that you're more successful. I think you're going to find that you're more successful in your career. I think you're going to find that you're more successful in your endurance training. And overall, it just perpetuates itself to just have a better quality of life. So that's why I say, if you want a good quality of life, sleep is non-negotiable, and you should try your best to, if you're not getting the best sleep, find ways that you can, and hopefully kind of be inspired by this to understand, get a little bit better of the biological understanding, and understand that behaviors and stuff like that might contribute to it.
Love it. Non-negotiable. I love that. I love that. Dr. Ribeiro?
So I would agree, sleep is definitely non-negotiable. As we have evidenced, I would say some great things that you could do to support good sleep. Something I recommend to a lot of my patients is something called binaural beats. You can search them on Spotify or YouTube, but obviously with your blue light filters on. So it's just music that you can turn on that helps your brain kind of shut down, kind of like basically helps you to put yourself to sleep. Another thing that you could do is, like I had mentioned before, is meditation or mindfulness exercises, and trying to still and clear your mind is also going to be really beneficial for helping you to get to sleep.
Yeah, that's right. Dr. Gill, what about yourself?
Yeah, I guess I would say I have two answers. So one is definitely, that bedtime routine I think is so important. We want our brains have memory of what our typical day looks like on a 24-hour period. And we definitely want to build in repetition. So our brain knows when, hey, it's 9 o'clock, it's time to start, slowing down and transitioning into the sleep phase. So I really think the bedtime routine is something that probably most people who have poor sleep are going to struggle the most with, because it really is a big change. A few ideas to help instigate that change. I kind of say to my patients, just give yourself 15 minutes before bed and do something that's either reading or meditation or something intentionally just calming. And then every week, add 5 minutes to it. And the goal is it may take 40 minutes, it may take 50 minutes to really have enough time to kind of wind down from the day, but we want to basically help our brains remember that it's time to sleep. So for me, I love reading. I think is really, really excellent before bed, really just to kind of calm down. Obviously, reading the right kind of book. So I think bedtime routine is probably what most people are going to struggle with the most, but can be the most beneficial. My other answer, though, which is kind of cheating the question, is know when it's the right time to ask for help and to see a qualified health professional to get help. So if you make some of these lifestyle changes, or if you try to work on your diet or follow some of these suggestions and your sleep is still poor, as we've kind of talked about, having a chronic year-long history of poor sleep is very, very damaging to your health, and in a lot of ways contributes to risk for Lyme disease. So definitely know when it's time to ask somebody else for help, and don't be shy to do that.
Yeah.
So those are kind of two answers to the question.
No, that's great. And actually, I do have one more question for you from one of our guests who's tuning in. And the question is, can Dr. Gill repeat the part about turning off your thoughts off, and what contributes to not being able to do that?
Oh yeah. So the way that just turning the adenosine. Okay, I see. I think this came from earlier. Yeah, absolutely. So adenosine is a molecule in our brain, in our body, and it's basically a byproduct of metabolism. So if you're more active during the day and you're exercising, adenosine is going to build up. And the beneficial effect of adenosine building up is the more adenosine you have in the brain, the more it's basically the adenosine towards the end of the day is going to help your brain calm down and basically allow for you to have less ruminating thoughts and to really kind of turn things off mentally. That's one of the reasons why exercise is really beneficial. Caffeine actually blocks adenosine. So that really kind of heightened state of alertness that we know and love with caffeine, right, is the feeling of the opposite of adenosine. So if you imagine that feeling, its exact opposite is what having a workout with more adenosine release in your brain will contribute to. So I hope that answers that question.
Great. If that does not answer the question for the person who asked that, please type it in the Q&A section again. We do have another question. So the question is, what about sleep issues due to hormone changes? I think, Dr. Ribeiro, I think you might have touched base a little bit about hormones. So why don't you, we'll have you take a swing at this first.
So that's kind of a tricky thing, right? Like everybody's hormone profiles kind of vary a little bit. This is definitely one of those situations where you'd want to take Dr. Gill's advice and know that it's time to ask for somebody's help. If your hormone levels are out of balance, that's something that would more a thorough investigation of what's going on. Obviously, we talked about sleep impacts all of our hormones. If you're not getting good quality sleep, your brain is not in a position to do, it's not thinking about like, okay, well, my sex hormones are off. It's thinking about how do I stay alert and not get, trapped by a bear or something, right? Like cortisol is going to help you stay alert and get through your day and help you to find the energy you need to get through your day until the next time you can find some sleep, right? Like reproduction is kind of off the table at that point. So definitely sleep and reproductive hormones are very, very tightly linked. But this is definitely something where we kind of need to know more about what's going on with you and kind of assess those hormone levels.
Sorry about that. I clicked something on Facebook and it clearly was playing live, so I apologize.
Oh,
that. Do you want to? Yeah. All right. I have another question here, and I think this was going to be perfect for Lori here. Assuming over the over-the-counter sleep aids are a big no?
Well, I think it depends on what the over-the-counter sleep aid is, but if you are having trouble sleeping, I would consult with your healthcare provider before like running to that right away, because again, there's a lot of behavioral things that we can do to improve our sleep. So that are actually easy to do, and it's just done in a routine. So it's not that it's a big no. It's just it depends on the individual person, and you have to kind of get the right assessment in order to make sure that you could take that safely.
Yeah, that's good. Awesome.
And then from Facebook, I know that Haley has asked if should I have been taking notes, and that's no, because we are going to make sure this is available for everybody to review again if they need to go back or miss something or need to hear it again.
Yeah, certainly. This will be left for everyone to view over and over again throughout the rest of this season. Any other questions there? That was great. We've gotten some really good responses through questions. And if not, it's okay. So, Dr. Tulio Ribeiro, Dr. Colin Gill, and Coach Lori, thank you so much for coming out and talking with us today. As always, there were so many good takeaways that I'm looking forward to implementing them, sleeping better, and getting all the benefits that come with it. Everyone, if there's one thing I hope you take away is that sleep is something that we might take for granted, that it does affect everything from our energy to our hormones, our cravings, to our ability to recover from a workout. And if you want to improve everything at once, work on creating those healthy habits that will allow you to optimize your sleep. If you are interested in learning more and want to see either Dr. Ribeiro, Dr. Gill, or any one of our amazing team of providers at Align Modern Health, we are open for in-person services as well as telemedicine appointments. We are in network with most major insurances. And as a CES athlete, you do get a 10% off discount for all of our self-pay services. Just remember to mention that you are a CES athlete when you do go to our website at alignmodernhealth.com to schedule your appointment. So till then, stay healthy, stay safe, stay active. And this is Coach Ryan, and we hope you live your life to the fullest. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.